If you're a professional brewer, you know how frustrating it can be when you go to place a yeast order and what you're looking for is out of stock. Well, Imperial Yeast is here to help by guaranteeing that commercial orders up to 20 liters of 10 of their most popular strains will ship free if they're not in stock when you place your order. Some of these strains include A38 Juice for those hazy IPAs, A07 Flagship, a classic in clean American styles, L13 Global, which is said to be one of the world's most popular lager strains, A44 Viking for your warm fermented beers, and so many more. So in addition to pitching right with the highest quality yeast on the market, they're promising that yeast will be ready when you need it or shipping is on them. Whether you're a pro or a home brewer, if you haven't tried Imperial Yeast in your brewery, it's time to up your game. You can check out everything Imperial Yeast has to offer and place your commercial orders at imperialyeast.com. A few weeks ago, we made what we feel is a pretty exciting announcement that we're going to be starting the Brewlosophy Show, a YouTube channel where we're going to be sharing weekly videos of experiments, short and shoddy brew days, and all of the other crazy stuff we're known for. Now, managing and hosting the Brewlosophy Show is going to be Martin Keene, who has been hard at work preparing the first set of episodes that we're going to start dropping in February of 2023. It's likely that name sounds very familiar to a lot of you, and that's because Martin was the guy behind the Homebrew Challenge, a really popular YouTube channel that initially documented Martin's brewing of every BJCP beer style, a feat in and of itself. Then he started integrating other creative and fun content as well. It was because of my love of the Homebrew Challenge that I reached out to Martin early last year to see if he'd be cool hosting a live Q&A session with patrons of Brewlosophy. He agreed, and we started a conversation that ultimately led to him deciding to bring the Homebrew Challenge to a close while focusing all of his energy on the Brewlosophy Show. We consider ourselves incredibly fortunate for this decision. Now, at the time of Martin's live Q&A with patrons, I'm not entirely sure if we'd fully settled on the details of his involvement with us yet, but seeing as a number of our patrons had specifically requested Martin as a guest, there was no way we weren't going to have him host this session. That happened back in June of 2022, and now that he's officially a member of the Brewlosophy crew, we thought it'd be fun to share Martin's live Patreon Q&A with all of you listeners out there, not only as a sort of introduction to this great new member of our team, but also as a way to let folks know what they get to participate in as patrons of Brewlosophy. Now, if you are unfamiliar with Patreon, which I'm assuming you're not if you've been listening to this show, it's a really cool platform that frankly allows us to keep bringing you this podcast every week. Those people who appreciate what we're doing enough to make a small monthly pledge are known as patrons. And in return for their support, we give them a little something extra as a way to say thanks, something in addition to all of this free content. You learn all about the various awards we offer patrons over at patreon.com/Brewlosophy. So I'm not going to spend too much time on it, except for to say that our two most popular levels of support are the $3 tier, which gets you into these monthly live Q&A sessions with people in the brewing world, and our $5 tier, which is our number one, that also gets you a discount at Yakima Valley Hops every month. Past Q&A guests have included folks like Russian River's Vinny Chilurzo, The Alchemist John Kimmich, and a bevy of homebrewing all-stars like John Palmer and Gordon Strong. Coming up later this month, 2022 Oregon State Homebrewer of the Year and yet another new member of the Brewlosophy crew, Jordan Folks, will be hanging out with patrons and answering questions. As for the Yakima Valley Hops discount, they are always worth at least $5. For this month, January of 2023, patrons contributing at just $5 a month get $5 off 1 pound bag of fresh 2022 Mackenzie hops, which is a killer new variety known to impart beer with citrus and sweet fruit notes. Not a bad deal, especially when you consider your support keeps us doing this thing, and judging by the fact that you're listening to this, I'm assuming you get a little bit of value out of that. Again, if you're at all interested in learning more about becoming a patron of Brewlosophy, which we'd appreciate immensely, head over to patreon.com/Brewlosophy. If that doesn't float your boat, you can still help us out by using the links found at brewlosophy.com/support. We are affiliated with most of the places people buy brewing stuff online, including Amazon, More Beer, Great Fermentation, stuff like that. When you use those links, which you can also bookmark for future use, we get a small commission on each purchase that helps us to cover production costs. Finally, if you wouldn't mind letting us know what you think about this show by leaving a rating and review in Apple Podcast or wherever it is you listen to podcasts that allows you to leave a review, we'd really appreciate it. I just checked Apple Podcasts a couple weeks ago and saw that we just cracked the 950 review mark, which is amazing. But I know there are a bunch of you out there who have still yet to take the 2 minutes to do this. On top of giving us an idea of what listeners think of how we're doing, which we absolutely take to heart, those reviews also make it easier for people who may not have heard of the Brewlosophy podcast yet to find us. All right, feedback is brought to you by Clawhammer Supply, who in addition to having a remarkable YouTube channel chock full of great brewing related content, sell what we believe to be some of the best electric brewing systems on the market. If you've been considering making the move from propane to electric, you owe it to yourself to check out Clawhammer Supply. Whether you're after a 120 volt 5-gallon unit or something bigger like their powerful 240 volt 10-gallon system, Clawhammer has got you covered. Learn more about everything they have to offer at clawhammersupply.com, and don't forget to check their YouTube channel as well. Listener Jeff Claus wrote in with some feedback after listening to episode 266, where Cade and I went over our views about 2022 in general. Jeff said, after listening to episode 266, I couldn't believe that you get people complaining about the ads on your website. I love everything you guys do, and to think that people have the audacity to complain about seeing a few brewing related ads in exchange for loads of free content is just ridiculous. After hearing that, I decided to increase my level of support on Patreon, and I'm looking forward to all of the other perks that it brings. I mentioned in that episode that I get uncomfortable reading a lot of the feedback that we get from listeners of the show or people who read the website, because a lot of it is like this. And so I just want to say, Jeff, thank you so much for your support on Patreon. Thank you so much for the kind words. Like I said in that episode, it really is our primary source of support. Patreon is, without which we honestly would not be able to do what we're doing. We just simply could not cover the cost of doing this whole thing. That's just a simple fact. In regards to the complaints about the ads, I've kind of come to accept that it's just a part of the territory, something those who have never dabbled in content creation of this sort simply don't understand, and hence it's easier to complain about. Honestly, I have to believe the good majority of people get that our time and our effort that we put into creating the content we do is valuable. But even for those who don't get it and feel they should have their cake and eat it too, so to speak, it's all good. I mean, their complaints certainly aren't going to lead us to changing what we're doing. We have to be able to cover the cost of this thing. But I really do appreciate the fact they continue to read and listen despite not being 100% happy with the way things are going. So Jeff, thank you so much for the feedback. Thank you so much for the support. We really do appreciate you. If you have show feedback, you can send it to feedback@brewlosophy.com or drop us a note on social media. Alrighty, we'll be back with Martin Keen's live Q&A session with patrons of Brewlosophy right after this break. After a long brew day, the last thing I want to do is waste more time chilling wort. I've tried so many different options, and ultimately I settled on the super efficient immersion chillers made by Jaded Brewing. With the King Cobra and Hydra, I'm able to chill my entire batch of wort from boiling to just a few degrees above groundwater temperature in as little as 6 minutes. If an immersion chiller is right for your brewery, then do yourself a favor and check out all of the rad options Jaded Brewing has to offer at jadedbrewing.com. And be sure to let them know Brewlosophy sent you. Family-owned Atlantic Brew Supply is the largest homebrew shop in the Southeast. No gimmicks, no multinational corporate overlords, and no BS. They offer exclusive malts, yeast, and more from local artisans, as well as award-winning recipe kits. They also sell professional brewing gear and cask equipment from sister companies ABS Commercial and Cask Supply. Most ingredients are available by the ounce, plus Atlantic Brew Supply has an on-site calculator to help you craft your best brew. Orders are processed same day, and 2-day shipping is guaranteed for East Coast customers. Get 15% off your first order using promo code BREWPOD. That's BRUPOD at AtlanticBrewSupply.com. Real quick, before we get into Martin's Q&A, it is important to remember that these are originally done over video, and guests often rely on that to give patrons a little tour of their brewery or whatever it is that they kind of want to show off. Also, this session happened over 7 months ago, so just keep that stuff in mind. All right, here's Martin Keen.
Okay, so the live stream is open. If you're watching the replay of this, by the way, I've got a bunch of cool stuff to show you on this Q&A. The way that we're going to do this is I'm going to take questions, so we could be talking about anything, but I have a basic plan, which is to say that the first third, let's say, of this session, we're going to talk about the Homebrew Challenge, specifically the 99 Beer Challenge, what that was like, some of the things that I learned along the way. I've got a few stories to tell, that sort of thing. Then we're going to do, the second segment is really going to look at some cool gear. I have all sorts of stuff here to show you, like this machine here, so we'll be taking a look at the cool gear, and also talking about some of the stuff that is coming up in some upcoming videos, just between us patrons. And then the final part of this, I'd like to talk a little bit about some brewing tips and also to get some of your feedback on that. So that's the plan for this session. Okay, so if you are joining the live stream, welcome, thank you. We're going to get started in a couple of minutes. But while we do, I would really appreciate if you could just put where you're from in the comments section. I'd love to know where everybody is from today. And Dennis, hello. Good to have you here. I'm starting with coffee this morning. I have literally come off the campsite. I was even going to do this live stream at the campsite and then decided not to because I wasn't too sure that the cellular connection was going to hold up, so I ended up driving home. And I didn't have a coffee yet, so that's beverage of the day to start with. Steve, thanks for joining from Virginia, and then Haven from Wisconsin. And yeah, thanks for your kind words. I'm very excited to be part of this. You know, we're all here because we love Brewlosophy, and when Marshall asked me to come talk on this, I was really interested. I've been watching some of the other sessions. My Clawhammer buddies were on quite recently. Sarah Flora was on at the start of the year, so it's really interesting to hear from them as well. And for today's session, I'm just using my studio. So if you've seen any of my videos on the Homebrew Challenge, I have this set up, and I have all of these cameras mounted because I self-shoot everything. This is just me doing everything. I have everything as automated as possible. So I have two cameras at the front. I have this one here, and then if I switch my little controller, you can see my side camera as well. So when I'm chatting with a guest, we have that. Then I have this kind of close-up camera. So, you know, here we are looking at this thing. You can see that. And then my favorite part, the top-down camera. This is really cool. And then I have this little box here that lets me switch between them. But when we do the tasting sessions, I get to just send all of this stuff to that box, and then I can edit it a little bit later when we do the tasting. And I've just got these 4 camera angles to choose from. So I'm going to be using that a little bit today just because it's here and cool. And there are some things I'd like to show you today. So yeah, that's why we're using this kind of over-engineered solution with 4 camera lenses looking at me just for a Facebook live stream. Yeah. Yeah, Dennis checking in from the Netherlands. Perfect time for an amber ale. Couldn't agree more with that. So what I'd like to do with this session today is, firstly, thank you very much for coming along and looking forward to chatting with you all. The way this works with Facebook is I just are going to see your comments, as I can't bring you on live or anything like that, but that's fine. And as we go through this session, if you've got any questions about anything that I'm talking about, or really anything at all for me, just put them in. I'm going to be following along. But I did have a little bit of structure for today's talk, so I wanted to divide this into 3 parts. Firstly, I'm going to talk a little bit about the 99 Beer Challenge itself. So really a little bit about what it was like to brew all these beers, some of the things that I learned along the way, my favorites, things I will never brew again, and just sort of talk about that. And if you have questions about that, I'd love to hear them. The second part, we're going to talk about some gadgets. So for example, here I have this canning can seamer called Benchmark from October. I've used some of these gadgets in a lot of my videos, but I have been doing a few things recently with some new gadgets that I haven't released videos for yet, and normally I wouldn't talk about those, but it's just us patrons here, right? So I'm going to tell you about some of the things that I've been working on and some of the gear that I've been playing around with. Some of it fancy like this, some of it very, very cheap, and what that's been like. Just as long as you promise not to mention it to anybody else until the videos release. And then the third stage of today is I'd like to talk a little bit about brewing tips. I have become obsessed with really optimizing brewing because I have done it so frequently, like making your brew day shorter and all those sorts of things you can do without negatively affecting the beer. So I love the short and shoddy series on Brewlosophy, for example. And I'd like to get your feedback on that and also tell you about some of the things that I'm doing. I did recently put out a video about how I'm only boiling for 30 minutes, for example. And there are a bunch of other things like that that I'm looking into. So that will be kind of the third part of this session. Okay. So with that being said, let's get started. And any questions you have for me, please hit me up in the in that comments section. And I wanted to talk about this 99 beer challenge first of all. So when I started homebrewing, I started like a lot of us did, I think, with like Mr. Beer kits. I had a Mr. Beer kit. It was okay. I didn't do a very good job with it, but it really got me interested in beer. And then I ended up moving to extract kits and doing Brewer's Best and so forth. So I was just buying pre-built recipes, and you're pretty limited. There's a good selection of them, but you know, there's the amber ale, the brown ale, the pale ale, and if you want to do something a little bit outside of those realms, you're in trouble. So that's what sort of moved me into all grain and to brewing, and I ended up buying this very big Blickman Brew Easy set. So this is a 2 kettle series where you have a mash tun at the top and then the hot liquor tank at the bottom, and you cycle between them. And I bought this a really big one, so it was for 10-gallon batches, so they were basically 20-gallon kettles. And I was brewing with a friend, and we would do it every month or so, and it was fun. And then we're like, you know what, let's film this might be fun. So I created a channel called Homebrew How To, because I thought that had a nice ring to it, Homebrew How To. And I posted these videos of me and my buddy brewing these beers. Now the trouble was, we didn't know what we were doing, so when we say how to, it really was how not to more often than not. And people in the YouTube comments were not shy to let us know that, which was fine. And in fact, it was the thing that kept me going and kept me posting more videos, because it was almost like this self-help group thing. As long as you didn't mind a little bit of flack, you know, would post something and people would be like, what are you doing with your mash temp? Or you have no idea, you probably want to add some oxygen in if you have a 10% beer that you're trying to ferment, that sort of thing. So it ended up being a really good way of us just posting something and then finding out how we should have done it better. After a while though, and I started to get the hang of things a bit more, what I found I was doing was really going through a cycle of just brewing the same stuff over and over again, my favourite styles. So I really like British beers, so I'd brew a bitter. I would brew a pale ale, because I really like that. And I would brew an Irish stout as another one of my favourites, and then a Belgian triple. And I would kind of cycle just between these styles because I was familiar with them and I knew I liked them. And I was finding that I was brewing less and less because of that. Then somebody told me about the BJCP guidelines and how they had mapped out all of these different beer styles, and they categorized them together. So German lagers were together and Belgian Trappist ales were together and so forth. And I saw that and I was like, whoa, I want to brew them all. I want to go from the top of the list to the bottom. And I counted them up, and if you excluded like some of the sort of auxiliary styles, there were basically 99 regular styles. I was like, right, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to brew all 99 beer styles. And I thought, I'll just do this one a month with my buddy, and you know, we'll work our way through it. And then I realized how long that was going to take. So I switched from monthly to weekly, thinking, well, now this is only going to be 2 years. And in doing that, that really made me think this is going to be an awesome opportunity for YouTube. To me, that was something that I would be really interested in, watching somebody brewing all the different beer styles and so forth. So I'd already rebranded my channel at this point, and I decided that I was going to call it the Homebrew Challenge, and the challenge was to brew these 99 beers in 99 weeks, and that's where we got to. Right, so before we go on, let me just have a look at the comments. Oh yeah, so Haven says, are you ever planning on doing a smoked beer again? Now, one of the things with brewing all of these beers is you have to brew beer styles going in that you suspect you're not going to like. And as I looked through the styles, there was one beer style, a smoked beer, a Rauch beer, that I knew was going to be bad because I just don't really like smoked anything. But I saw there were several other beers that had smoked malts as well. So my Rauch beer was just, I thought, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to go in all the way. I ended up using 95% cherry smoked malt, something like that. I realized afterwards that that was a ridiculous amount of smoked malt, and in fact the maltster recommended not going above 30% of your malt bill with this smoked malt. And this thing tasted like an absolute bonfire. Just brewing it, the brewery smelled like a bonfire, and drinking it, it was like drinking ash, really. It was extremely unpleasant, and I have nobody but myself to blame because I just completely put way too much smoked cherry malt into this beer. The thing is, that sort of turned me off all smoked beers after that. I mean, I already wasn't a fan, and then when the other smoked beers came up, there was a smoked sour beer. It was a bit better, but it was like PTSD. I'd keep coming back to this other beer. So I think this has become such a running thing now that I absolutely think I do need to revisit the Rausch beer and rebrew it with a proper amount of cherry smoked malt and just try this again, because I need to get over this, and I'm sure that some smoked beers can be quite delicious, and it's just hard to overcome that previous one. Question from Dennis: were there any styles that you were surprised about? Maybe something that you liked way more than you would have expected? Yes, there were a whole bunch of styles in here that I'd never heard of, and some of those became some of my favorites. Now, I think most people probably know what a Maibock is, but I'd never had one, and I really, really like the Maibock style. And really the whole point of doing the 99 beer challenge was to come up with new styles beyond the like 5 or 6 that I kept doing over and over again. And that was really one of the highlights of going through this process, was finding all of these beer styles that I really, really liked. Piwo Grudzieckie as well. Sorry, Polish people, if you're watching. But that was another good one. Keller beer, really liked that. My favourite styles going in, as I say, were English and Belgian, and neither of those were at the start of the challenge. I had to go, I think, about 9 months in before I got to any British styles at all. And then the Belgian styles were one of the very last things that I did, so I was absolutely just couldn't wait to get to the Belgian ales. But by that point, I'd actually developed a taste beyond those beers, and I enjoyed them, but I didn't enjoy them as much as I thought, because I'd actually gone to favour some of these other beer styles now that I hadn't tried previously. So yeah, that was great. Yeah, Marshall says, I've never had a smoked beer I've actually enjoyed. Me neither. I'm trying. But I'm going to keep trying. I've got to keep trying. The smoked sour one was particularly weird, but actually after drinking that one for a little while, it started to develop a bit of a taste for it. Not so bad. Okay, so that was the 99 beer challenge. Another question from Steve: have you ever had a temptation to go commercial? I struggle with major financial and personal sacrifice and haven't been able to commit. Have I thought about going commercial? Not for a minute. It's not for me. I already have a full-time job in tech, and I do this as a hobby, and I really, really enjoy doing it. Otherwise, I wouldn't be spending as much time as I am doing it. But no, I'm not going to do this as a professional thing. It's a very competitive area. I don't know how I would stand out over other people, really. But I love brewing with professional brewers and so forth, and just this whole community, just being part of this community has been such a good thing that I'm quite happy to stay where I am. Okay, right, let's talk about Lichtentiner. Was that the smoky sour beer? I think that was possibly it. Not good. Let's talk a little bit about some of the equipment that I used on the 99 beer challenge, because I ended up using 3 different brewing systems and a whole bunch of different fermenters as I went through this. So I started off, as I said earlier, with a Blichmann Brew Easy system intended to brew 10 gallons with, and I realized pretty quickly that if I was brewing a beer every week, that doing 10 gallons of beer per week was not going to work out too good for me. So I started to modify it to brew 5 gallons. Like, maybe I can get through 5 gallons of beer and give it away per week. But the Blickman system was not really well suited to doing that. There were some tweaks that you could do to it, but when you have that little amount of liquid and that little amount of a grain mash bed, it just doesn't work very well, and it was a lot of tinkering to get that to work. So I ended up selling that, and I bought a system that was intended to brew 5-gallon batches. So I got a system from Brau Supply, electric system, like the Blickman system was, and that worked great. So that had a basket in it for putting the mash into. You then pull that basket out, and then you just boil in there. So it's all in one kind of brew in the basket system, which is just super popular, and that was great. And I brewed with that for a little while, and then I ended up actually switching that out after, I don't know, not that long, maybe 6 months, and moving on to the Clawhammer Supply system, which is very similar to the Brau Supply system in that it's an all-in-one brew in the basket kind of system. But I got to know the Clawhammer guys. I mean, I knew them from their videos, so they just do the best videos, I think. So I love their videos, and I ended up using their system, and I have been on that ever since. And I must have put well over 100 batches through that system since, and it has been fantastic. The things that I really like about electric brewing are just all of the little tweaks that you can make to the brewing system, how easy it is, how you can leave it running overnight and do things like overnight mashes. You can do step mashes really, really easily, although I tend not to do those very much, but you just have such control over everything. So electric brewing, I love to do that, and for me, as we'll come to talk about in a moment, I really like to simplify everything that I can, like reduce the moving parts, and the Clawhammer system for me was perfect for that. So that's on the hot side. On the cold side, I went originally with some SS Brewtech brew buckets, which were great, and I would just put those in chest freezers. That solution was good. It was good. The only problem was, because I was brewing so much, I had chest freezers everywhere in this basement down here. So I can't really show you the basement. I don't have any wide shots in here, but I mean, if you've watched my videos, you'd have seen it. Everywhere I had chest freezers. If you listed a chest freezer on Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace in the Raleigh area, then I was probably messaging you about buying it, because I needed, especially because all of the beers at the start of the BJCP guidelines are lagers, so they need to be conditioned. I would put these brew buckets in, and then I would transfer to a keg, and then I'd lager in the keg, and I would use that for fermentation control, and it just got out of hand, and just, chest freezers everywhere. So eventually I realized I wanted something that would allow me to do some sort of temperature control that didn't require chest freezers, and I ended up moving sort of 2/3 of the way through the challenge to a glycol system. So Blickman Engineering have a glycol chiller that they sent me, and I used that glycol chiller to send glycol in to a system that I have from Spike Brewing, and I have the CF5 and the Spike X Plus, both systems enabled with cooling coils that work with the glycol chiller. So those were able to just sit out on on my side, and I could connect actually up to four different devices for chilling. And in addition to those two Spikes systems, which did most of my brews, I also had a Firmzilla all-rounder, also with a cooling coil, so I could use that for temperature control. And then that really just freed up all of that space, and I was able to sell all those chest freezers. I only have a couple around here now. I keep one for my as like an overflow for kegs, and then I have one which I use as a freezer where I keep my yeast and my hops, or my frozen yeast, Penco, my hops. So moving to that was really good. So I went from initially using just brew buckets and all the way through to these really fancy stainless steel tri-clamped brewing systems with glycol. Is kind of how I finished the challenge. Does it make any difference? Was I making better beer with all the fancy systems? Actually, we've kind of put that to the test, and not really, but it was certainly a lot more convenient. Okay, let me have a look at some of the questions here. Okay, so let's see. Feel free when you are touch on your claw hammer system, but how do you like brewing 3 gallons in the 240 10-gallon system? Yeah. Okay, so to go back to the claw hammer system that I have, they do a bunch of different sizes and 2 power options, the 120 volt and the 240 volt. I do have both, but the 240 volt is awesome. My goodness. With the Brauer Supply system, I also had 240, and it is just the best that you can put your water in, and it gets to mash temperature before I've measured out my water salts. You know, I don't know how long it is. By the time I've measured out water salts, set up the cameras, it's ready to go. So maybe 10 minutes, and then from mash to boil temp, well, maybe 5 minutes from that. And when I pull the basket out and let it drain, by the time the basket's drained, I'm boiling. So it's saving a ton of time with that. So it's less convenient because you do need to install, in the US at least, you need to install a dedicated plug for that. But it was very much worth it for me, just for the amount of time saved. I mean, if I'm saving 20 minutes just on heating water, or 30 minutes, and I'm doing that every week for 99 weeks, that's a huge saving. So, yep. And the 10 gallons, brewing 3-gallon batches, that's another thing that works really well with the claw hammer system. Is actually, I think you could brew comfortably 2.5 gallons in their 10-gallon system, and that'd be fine as well. It just needs to be enough wort at the end of boil to be covering the heating element, and that's at about 2 gallons. So if you go with 2.5, that's a comfortable amount. I brew 3-gallon batches now rather than 2.5, and that's actually because the fermenters that I'm using, the Thermowell comes up to the 3-gallon level, so that's how far I go. Otherwise I'd have to deal with lowering the Thermowell somehow. But yeah, if you want to do small batches, it works really well. Do you ever have any issues with protein scorching on the heating element? No. The heating element really cycles on and off very quickly, and I haven't had any scorching problems, despite some pretty lax brewing at times. I think the only time I had any issue whatsoever was when I was using some liquid malt extract, and I forgot to turn the heating element off when I added the liquid malt extract in, and that did create a little bit of a burnt taste, I think, to the beer, or it certainly darkened it. So that would be the case with any system. They turn off your brewing element before you do that.
As every brewer knows, the best beer requires the best hops, which Yakima Valley Hops provides fresh from the source to brewers around the world, carrying everything from classics like Cascade to modern favorites like Galaxy and Mosaic, as well as other ingredients and gear. Yakima Valley Hops has it all. And don't forget to check out their new podcast, The Late Edition, where the YVH crew goes into depth on our favorite plant with industry experts. Head over to YakimaValleyHops.com now to see all they have to offer, and subscribe to The Late Edition wherever it is you listen to podcasts. There's no denying that stainless steel is the best material for brewing equipment, and Delta Brewing Systems offers some of the lowest prices on high-quality stainless gear, like the Firm Tank, which in addition to holding 8 gallons or 30 liters of wort, comes with a domed lid to even further reduce the chances of a messy blow-off. Plus, it can hold up to 4 psi of pressure for closed transfers. Delta Brewing Systems also has their own line of brew kettles, as well as one of the lowest-priced all-in-one electric brewing systems out there, and their prices are shockingly low. If you're in the market for legit stainless gear that won't break the bank, do yourself a favor and head over to deltabrewingsystems.com today. Chilling wort can be a chore, especially after a long brew day, but not with the Xchillerator Counterflow Chiller, which can chill a 5-gallon or 19-liter batch of wort in 5 minutes or less, leading to a strong cold break and clear wort in the fermenter. Brulosophy's Matt Del Fiacco uses the Xchillerator Max and absolutely loves it. In addition to improved chilling efficiency, every Xchillerator comes with a 5-year warranty that covers the entire chiller for manufacturer defects. If you're looking to up your chilling game and a CFC is right for you, head over to Xchillerator.com today.
With brewing so many styles, did you ever have any challenges sourcing out ingredients? Yes, thank you for that question, Patrick. I pretty early on ended up collaborating with a homebrew store local to here, Atlantic Brew Supply, and the kind of the situation we had is that as long as I mentioned I was using Atlantic Brew Supply, they would give me all of the ingredients for my beers. That was, I'd give them my recipe and they could sell it, and mention the fact on my channel that I'm using Atlantic Brew Supply, and they send me the recipes. So I just ended up building all of my recipes based upon what Atlantic Brew Supply had in stock, which was pretty much everything. But yeah, that was the case. I think the only thing that was ever a concern was when I brewed the Sati beer, because you don't use hops for Sati, you use juniper berries, or you could actually use juniper branches. They didn't have any juniper branches in stock, but they did have juniper berries. But Todd at Atlantic Brew Supply was like struggling to find them, and I think they actually found them. There's a brewery connected to Atlantic Brew Supply that's kind of a sister company, Riley Brewing Company, and they found some juniper berries, so they were able to source that for me. But in general, I've not had too much of a problem sourcing the ingredients. Okay, and Dennis mentioning about the smoked beer again. Don't go overboard with the smoked malt, that is for sure. Okay, so in just a moment, I'd like to give you a little preview of some of the little gadgets and whatnot that I've been using in some upcoming videos. Just before that, I just wanted to touch briefly on the production schedule for this 99 beers thing, because a lot of people ask about that, like what was it like to make that many beers and make videos and whatnot. And the way that worked is that every week I was making a beer, but really I was working on probably 4 or 5 beers every week. So I would have a recipe design, and I'd normally do like 4 or 5 recipes at once and send those to Atlantic Brew Supply. So I'd be doing that once a month, set aside a day for that. Then I would have the brew day for whatever beer I was brewing, and I would do that often early mornings or weekends. Sometimes early mornings before work turned out to be the easiest way to do that. Then I would have a video to edit, so the brew day footage to edit. Then I would have the beer to package and condition. So they'll be working on another beer where I'm like taking it out of the fermenter and putting it in the keg and packaging it. Then we would get to the tasting stage as well. So that same week I would set aside one day a week to take one of the beers that had been conditioning for a while, bringing in a guest taster and try those. This was all done through COVID, so I'd initially intended to bring in all sorts of my home brewing buddies in the area, also try to collaborate with a few actual professional brewers and have them try my beers. Didn't really work out, and I ended up just using family members for most of the tastings. And then I would also have to edit, upload and create the thumbnail for the whatever video was going live that week. So I had all of these things going on all at once: brewing the beer, getting the recipes ready for the next one, tasting a beer that I'd made weeks ago. It got kind of confusing, and it would get to the tasting stage and people would ask me like, so what's the malt bill in this one? And I'm like, oh, I can't remember. I've worked on 5 beers since I worked on this one. So that was kind of an interesting aspect of it all. All right, so that sort of concludes the 99 beer challenge stuff. If you have any more questions about that, just shoot me those in the comments. I wanted to talk a little bit about some beer gadgets and some of the things that I've been using recently that I really like, and also give you a little preview of some stuff that's coming up in some future videos. So let's take a look at some stuff. So we will first of all start with this guy here. So this is a canning seamer. It's called the Benchmark. I've seen a bunch of YouTube videos on this now. I've done 1 or 2 as well. I've just recently got into canning. I've previously just been filling up growlers and whatnot, or really kegging everything. But I really like this idea now of canning some of my beers and keeping them around for a bit longer, and it's also a really easy way to hand them around to other people. So I've got a canning solution that works really well for me that combines a couple of different manufacturers' products. So that's why I wanted to mention that one. So this is the Benchmark. It just uses an electric drill. So you just take a regular electric drill here. Anything will work really, and that's what will spin the cans around. And then from there, you just put your can in. There's a seaming process where you just pull back, push forwards, like 1 second each. It's done. It's seamed. So really, really easy to put together. But you've got to fill the cans first, right? And you could just pour out of the tap. But the nice thing about cans is how you can just really keep oxygen out, but the key to that is making sure there's no oxygen going in the first place. Well, there is a counterfill option that I have here. So this is the Tap Cooler Canner. It's magnets, so this is not part of the benchmark, but these magnets here, let me get to the camera that shows this best. Yeah, so this is just connected on with magnets, and it's I mean, I'm pushing here, I can't even move this thing, but this, you could put this onto your refrigerator or whatever it is, but basically you put your can into here, and then you seal it up, and then I have this tap cooler device. Let me move to the overhead camera for that. This tap cooler device that then goes in through here, and it allows you to hook up some CO2 here. Through the top you add the beer, and then you have this valve, and then you can basically push this button that will flush out the can with CO2. Then you open the valve, fill the can with beer. Once that's done, you would unclip it, and then around the other side here you then put your can in, and away you go. So that has been a really handy way to can. I really like this idea of combining fairly inexpensive can seamer with pressure pressure transfer using this tap cooler. Okay, let me tell you about a couple of other things that I've been working on. A while ago I did a video where I compared one of my fancy Spike fermenters, a $900 fermenter, to a $20 plastic PET fermenter, and we brewed the same beer, split it between the two fermenters, tasted the beer, and did a poorly executed triangle test, I would say, where we tried to see, can we tell the difference between the two beers? And it turns out that we couldn't. My taster Norm and I, we couldn't tell the difference. And that was considering the fact that the $20 fermenter had a bunch of disadvantages that the expensive fermenter didn't. So the expensive fermenter was temperature controlled with glycol. The cheap fermenter was just left out on the side. And we also had all sorts of oxygen exposure with the cheap fermenter, where we had to just open the fermenter up. We transferred just by opening up a valve and sending the beer through a spigot directly into a keg, splashing with oxygen and whatnot. That wasn't ideal either. So I've got a video coming up where I'm taking this fermenter, and this is the guy. So this fermenter here, it's a little wet because I've just been cleaning it, but this is my $20 PET fermenter with a little spigot. And what I've tried to do is convert it to have all of the advantages that my more expensive system had. So for example, I wanted to be able to perform pressure transfers. So I took this guy here, which is the lid, and I added this quick disconnect to it. And then I put a little washer in here and so forth. You know, if you watch the video, you'll see all of this. But the idea was, I was thinking I could use this to pressure transfer, and it turns out that the people that make this fermenter, it's called a Fermonster, actually say they had tested it up to 10 psi of pressure, and although it wasn't officially pressure rated, it could hold a bit of pressure. It was thick enough for that. So I've been using this to put pressure into my fermenter, and that way I was able to pressure transfer out of it. And the way I was able to do that is then just to use this. Let me switch to the top camera. Just use this, which connects to the spigot at the bottom here, and then go directly into the keg. So for that, into the keg. And if you want to see how that turned out, then check out the video. But what I ended up doing was brewing a New England IPA, which is super susceptible to any sort of oxygen ingress. So if this didn't work, we would know about it by the color, by the off taste of the beer. We just did the beer tasting for that yesterday, and turns out that with a little bit of MacGyvering, you can really turn one of these cheap fermenters into something special. So that's one thing I've got coming up. The other thing I wanted to show you is this hop bong, modified hop bong actually. What I've got here is, let's go to the this camera. What I've got here is this bit of tubing here. This is basically the hop bong with a couple of disconnects on it, and you can use this for a number of different purposes, but this basic idea is that you load this up with hops so that you can add hops into your fermenter without being able to do anything, without having to really open up and expose to oxygen. So you could put hops in the top of this thing here, you could then add some pressure to it, and then I've added this little lever here, and if you pull that, it will drop down the hops into the fermenter without opening anything up. So I've not even used this yet, but I've got sent these from Kegland, and there's actually a bunch of different things you can do with them beyond that. The thing I thought about using this for is I'm starting to try to use finings again a little bit more with my beers. Generally I just let them cold crash and then leave them in the keg for a little while before serving. You never end up with a super clear beer that way, so I kind of like the idea of adding finings. The downside is that is the only time I have to open up my fermenter after adding the wort in there. All the rest of the time that fermenter stays closed all the way through transferring into the keg, and this one time I open up the fermenter and bring air in is when I am adding in my finings, and I don't like it. So I'm thinking I'm going to use a hop bong, connect this to my CF5 onto my Flex Plus, and fill this with my fining agent, gelatin or whatever it is, pressurize it to get rid of the oxygen, and then add that in, and then I won't have to open up my my fermenter. So I'm going to give that a try. The other ways you can use this are you can use this as a hop randle as well. So you could just fill this with hops, put beer in at the top, get another one of these caps and put that at the bottom, and then send beer through it, and then that way you get some aromas from the hops as the beer passes through this. And when I've used this sort of thing before, not in a hop bong but in something similar to this, it really brings out the aroma of sort of really fresh aroma of hops. So I'm really looking forward to giving that a try. But that's some of the stuff I've got coming up. Throughout this whole 99 challenge, I've been going through, and people have been sending me stuff, or I've been interested in trying stuff, and it's been really fun to see all the sort of homebrew things that are out there. I love all these sort of gadgets. So yeah, that's some of the things coming up. All right, Steve, thanks for your kind words about watching the 99 challenge. Did you ever have a critical camera shot not turn out, or did you ever lose brew day footage that forced you to improvise on the spot? Yeah. It got to a point where I had some problem with one of my cameras, and you would record on the camera, but sometimes it would get corrupted. The video footage would get corrupted on the SD card, and then you wouldn't have the footage. Now, I pretty much film everything from multiple camera angles, so if there's a part of the brew day process that one of the cameras was corrupted with, it's not the end of the world, because I can always just use one of the other angles. But for some of the tasting footage, I was losing the main camera, the camera that I'm talking to right now, which also has the audio on it, so it was an absolute disaster not to have that. So there were several times where we did a tasting, and then I would run to my computer with the SD card from the camera and plug it in, and be like, oh crap, it's not there. And we would have to do the tasting from scratch. So I would sit down with my taster and we'd be like, right, let's give this beer a sniff. And we would have to go through the whole thing again like we'd never done it. And we did that maybe 3 or 4 times. There were 3 or 4 beer tastings where that was the situation. And that's when I ended up building this solution with this custom system that has 4 buttons over here and sends everything to a hard disk and all that stuff. So, yeah. Okay, right. The third section that I'd like to just chat about a little bit today is the kind of the brew day tips. As I've been going through these 99 beers, I've tried to optimize the whole process because I've been doing it so frequently, but also, even if I wasn't, I just have that personality flaw, I guess, that I just want to optimize everything. Like, just to give you an example, where I go to work, I work at a tech company, and we work at a big campus. And for a while, we would park in this parking lot, and then we'd have to walk from the parking lot through the building, up the stairs, down the corridor to my office. And it's about 5 minutes from shutting the car door to opening my office door. That long a walk. Not a big deal, right? I mean, I don't care. 5 minutes walk. But then I found that there was kind of like this secret little parking spot around the corner of the building. And if you went through the fire door, which didn't have an alarm on it, you could park right outside that door. And you could go from being in the car to being in your office in about 20 seconds. Now, it's not because I'm lazy and didn't want to walk for 5 minutes, but the fact that I was able to reduce my commute time from the car to the office from 5 minutes to like 20 or 30 seconds, I was so happy with that. For months, it didn't wear off. I'd be like thinking, well, look, I'm saving 5 minutes on the walk in, and then 5 minutes on the way back, so that's 10 minutes, and that's just 10 minutes today, and I go to work 5 times a week, so that's nearly an hour every week, which is 4 hours a month. This whole productivity thing, it's stupid, but that was kind of how I would think. So I've really addressed every aspect of my brew day like that as well, and tried to see what sort of things you can cut out without really affecting the quality of the brew too much, or hopefully not at all. Just to make things more efficient. So my brew days now, from coming into this room here and then setting up the cameras and being finished with everything like washed out and soaking, I would say, and all the footage downloaded, is probably like 3.5 hours. In the comments, if you want to let me know how long your brew day is, I would love to hear that. I would love to hear that, because when I started brewing, I was taking 5.5 hours, sometimes 6 hours, and I kind of got it down to 3.5 hours. But I've been trying to find ways to get it down to maybe 2 hours. And the things that I've been looking at are, the biggest times for me are clearly the mash, and then the boil. And those are the biggest two, and then also a little bit of the chilling and adding to the fermenter. What could you do to reduce that? Well, I have been doing 30-minute boils for over a year now, and I just change my hop utilization accordingly. So if I know I'm only boiling for 30 minutes, I might need to add more hops in at the start than I would normally, but it's not much more. And I'm only brewing 3-gallon batches, so a 1 ounce bag is normally quite sufficient. So 30-minute boils has been great. I almost never ever boil for an hour now. I don't care if it's all Pilsner malt that I'm using. Not really had DMS issues that at least I've been able to pick up on. So that's been a big time saver. I would like to do a shorter mash as well. And that's something I'm starting to look at. And I would love to hear as well, like what people are doing with their shorter mashes. Or do you mash for an hour and a half? I always say I would typically mash for about 45 minutes, then do a mash out, and then take a pre-boil gravity reading and see where I'm at. But I know some brewers that are spending 20-30 minutes on the mash, and you might see 5% drop in efficiency or something like that. But not so awful. So mash time I would like to reduce as well. The other thing I do with chilling, as I mentioned, I have a glycol setup. So what I do right now is I use a plate chiller, and I recirculate through the plate chiller for about 5 minutes. And when the wort is close to groundwater temperature, then I'll move it into the fermenter. And if that groundwater temperature is a little bit above where I want to pitch my yeast, which it frequently is in the summer in North Carolina, then I will then just use the glycol system to get it down to the necessary temperature, which doesn't take long at all. I mean, it does make me wonder, why am I bothering with the plate chiller? Could I just go straight into the glycol system? Apparently that would be a very stressful thing to do on the glycol chilling system, and it could also lead to freezing of wort, so I don't think I'm going to do that. But rather than recirculating through the plate chiller, can I just go through the plate chiller once to get the wort down to, let's say, 100 Fahrenheit, and then from there go into my fermenter and then use glycol to chill the rest? That would save me about 15 minutes per brew, so I'd be kind of interested in that as well. So those are some of the options. So Haven says, I've adopted the 30-minute mash and boil for most beers, and if I prep the night before, I can keep my brew days to around 3.5 hours with cleaning. Yeah, that is fantastic. That really is great. The other way that I've done this is to have really, really long brew days, and those turn out to be quite efficient too. And what I mean by that is overnight mashing. So I will get the mash in, I will set my controller to whatever temperature I want to mash at, let's say 152 Fahrenheit, and then I will turn off the pump, leave it at 152 Fahrenheit, and go to bed. And then the next morning I will come down, and what's happened is overnight the heating element is just cycling on and off very infrequently, but frequently enough to keep the wort at about 152 Fahrenheit. So I have performed an overnight mash. And then I can just get up in the morning, and all I've got to do then is my 30-minute boil and then add into the fermenter. So it's like an hour and a half commitment. And that means I can easily get up before work, say, and do that part. Basically eliminated the mash stage completely. I'm not waiting around for it, I'm just sleeping through it. And that's worked really well. So I've tried that a few different ways. One with the heating element turned on and just cycling to keep things at 152. The other way I've done it is to get the mash to 152, then try to insulate the mash tun and not have the electrical unit on. And what I saw there is the temperature dropping pretty low by the next morning. So for me, the best approach has been to just keep the electrical unit on, the heating element on, and cycling on and off. And that's great. And I particularly like that if I do need to do a longer mash. For example, if I'm building a bigger beer, I sometimes find that even a 30-45 minute mash isn't long enough for some of the really big beers to get the full amount of efficiency that I'm looking for. So why not just let it do it all night? And I've not really had any downsides to that. So splitting a brew day like that has worked out quite well. I did try to split a brew day across 3 separate days at one point as well, where I did the overnight mash, then the boil on day 2, and then no chill. So I just moved the hot wort into the fermenter, left that for another day, and then added in my yeast the next day. So I removed the chill stage as well. It meant that each day was a very, very short commitment of time to be able to brew. So just whatever it takes, I think, to be able to fit brew days into your schedule. The idea originally of starting with a brew day and knowing that you had to complete it that day and that it's going to take 5 hours out of your day, that's like a huge commitment to get started, and it would often mean that I wouldn't get started. But now that I know I'm only talking about 3.5 hours if I go through the whole thing, and much less if I split it between 2 or 3 days, then I think you're going to find yourself brewing more often, which of course is a good thing, right? Okay, yeah, so that's no chill, mash time. Yeah, those are kind of my brew tips. In terms of these all-in-one systems where you do have a basket or you're doing brew in a bag, it does seem that you can get away with a pretty crazy crush size, and that crush size has a huge impact on efficiency numbers. It seems to matter more than anything else. So if I take the grains that I've received from the homebrew store, they have a pretty standard crush that's supposed to work with everybody's system, right? So it's not super fine. And if I use that without modifying it, it's going to see a bit lower efficiency than if I take that and then put it through my grain mill. And I have my grain mill kind of set credit card size, so I'll basically be doing a second milling of that grain, and then I'll see conversion happen a bit quicker. So I think I've started to do that now with my brews as well, is to do the double crush. That's worked quite well. But I would like to really push this and see how much I can really get this to be super fine, because I'm not going to get any sort of stuck sparge or anything like that because I'm using a basket. But if you could really grind this up into like flour, how does that affect the beer taste, and how does that affect the conversion? Does the conversion happen even quicker? I think Danny Kahn does that. He says he has his grain mill just where the rollers are like basically pushed together as close as they'll go, and then he's just creating flour from that, and he mashes for 20 minutes. Something to consider. All right, so we just have a couple of minutes left. So if you have any questions that I haven't really addressed, or any topics I haven't addressed, now is your chance. Love to hear from you. And yeah, I mean, just to sort of sum up a little bit, for me, I mean, I came into this whole brewing thing with very little experience at first with the Mr. Beer kits and then the Brewer's Best kits and stuff like that. But my goodness, what a fun hobby this is, right? And just the amount of different beer styles that you can make and how different they all are from each other, that was very eye-opening for me. And the other thing that actually we were talking about yesterday during a beer tasting was how, because the basic beer brewing process is the same for us home brewers as it is for commercial, really the difference is scale, but the basic way that we make beer is pretty much the same. We just do it at a much smaller scale. The result of what we produce, I think, rivals beer that you can get at your local craft brewery. And coming into home brewing, I assumed that would not be the case, and it wasn't the case with the early beers I made from extract. But it doesn't taste like homemade. Like, you know, if I was like trying to bake some cookies that stayed moist all the time, you know, even days later, I could have a go at that, and you know what? They would taste like homemade cookies. You would know they were homemade. But you get a Chips Ahoy cookie where they've used whatever preservatives and whatnot to keep it just chewy. Weeks later, that tastes like it's made in a factory, and it tastes like professionally made. With homebrew, I think you could absolutely take one of your better home brews and put it on tap at a craft brewery, and nobody would say that's the homemade stuff. You know, you can really create something that tastes professional, and that's one of the things that I really like about this. Is we are the product of what we produce. I mean, it's not always great, but it can be. And when you get a beer that tastes good, it is so satisfying to have that on tap and know you've got a whole keg of it for your enjoyment, and then to share with other people. Okay. Haven says, plans for the YouTube channel now the 99 beer challenge is done, just random brewing videos, or do you have ideas for more concentrated series? Yeah, a lot of people have asked me, like, what would you do after the 99 beers? And I've just been brewing. The thing that happened with that 99 beers challenge at first was, it was great how structured it was, because I knew tomorrow I'm brewing this beer style, next month I'm brewing this other beer style. I had my whole life mapped out for 2 years. And at first that was wonderful because I could plan accordingly, and then it got to the stage where I was like, oh, I've got to do another 4 more weeks of this beer style, like, you know, because they grouped them all together. There was like Czech pills and then Czech premium pills, and they were all so similar to each other, the styles, so you were just doing derivatives of the same thing over and over again. And I really got to thinking, I wish I could just like brew whatever I feel like. And what I started to do was create a list of beers that I wanted to do that weren't on this list of 99, including some fun ones. Like, my neighbours were saying, you know, we like garlic. What would happen if you put garlic in a beer? It's like, yeah, garlic beer. So I started to come up with recipes like that. And I did do some of those throughout the challenge. Sometimes I would do an additional video like that I'd release midway through the challenge. But I didn't do that very often because 99 beers in 99 weeks was pretty much all I could do. But I did do a few extras. But I had this list, and I just couldn't wait. I couldn't wait to finish the challenge, because that would mean then I could get to this list of all this other fun stuff. And also to revisit some of the styles that I'd done and now be able to tweak the recipes. Because when I started out, I was using some very basic recipes, and I think as I got through the challenge, I was building recipes that were a little bit more tailored to my tastes. I knew what worked for me, and the hops I liked and the malt I liked and the combination of things that I liked. So I wanted to go back to some of the early styles, rebrew them with like what I know now kind of thing. So that's really what I've been doing ever since. And the other thing I've been trying to do a lot more of is collaborations. So just this whole community, you know, all us homebrewers out here, and working with some of the other YouTube channels that were out there, things I just didn't have time to do when I was brewing. every week on a schedule. So yeah, it's just been that since then. And in fact, I finished the challenge over a year ago now, and I've just not been running out of ideas. There's so many different beer styles to try and brew and work on. So yeah, that's what's been going on. Garlic, just use Summit hops. Oh no, I was using actual garlic. Actual garlic cloves and Summit hops. That could have been something. And I tell you what, that garlic beer was decent, despite what you would think. It was just a touch of garlic, and it also made a great marinade for chicken. So it's generally not a good sign for your beer if people are marinating it with chicken's the favourite thing, but no, it kind of worked out. Yeah, Haven's saying, I hope you'd say you go back to the beginning. I'd love to see some of those early brews redone. Yeah. No. I can never imagine starting at beer 1 and like, okay, so here's American Light Lager again. This time I'm going to change from using rice to using corn. Yeah. Some of the earlier beers, I used things that were not traditional with the style. So I used Maris Otter. I love Maris Otter. I guess it's the British influence in me, the British heritage. But I would use Maris Otter I think I used Maris Otter in my American Light Lager or my American Lager, one of those. And it isn't really that appropriate for the style. So I did try to use ingredients from the country where the beer originated from as I went through. So it kind of would be cool to go back to some of those ones that I butchered a little bit and try them again. But I don't know, maybe if you could do like really small batches of these beers that didn't take 3.5 hours to brew, it would be fun to revisit some of them. Yeah. All right, well, that is just about time, I think. I really appreciate being invited on to chat with you, and if you are watching the replay of this as well, thank you for sticking with this. And yeah, this is like such a fun hobby, isn't it? And if you have any questions about something that I've said or any follow-up, then just find my YouTube channel. It's the Homebrew Challenge, and just shoot me a comment there. I see all the comments. Don't respond to all of them, but most of them, and I do see every single one. So yeah, thank you for watching this and for supporting Brewlosophy and all the great work that they have been doing. And that has been a huge inspiration for a lot of the stuff that I have done, especially some of these like shortcuts. The Short and Shoddy series, for example, has been like inspirational for me as to find out that you can cut some of these corners and actually still end up with a good beer. So that was very useful. But yeah, thank you very much, and really appreciate your time, and I'll see you on YouTube.
Huge thanks to Martin for taking the time to hang out with patrons. Now that he is officially with Brewlosophy, you can get in touch with him by emailing martin@brewlosophy.com or by commenting on the videos he's going to start posting soon on the Brewlosophy Show YouTube channel, which you can subscribe to at youtube.com/@thebrewlosophy-show. If you're interested in learning more about all of the rewards we offer for your support, head over to patreon.com/brewlosophy, and huge cheers to all of our current patrons. Don't forget to subscribe to the Brew Lab, where host Cade Job takes you into the lab with brewing professionals to discuss the fascinating work they're doing on our favorite beverage. And remember to head over to brewlosophy.com to stay current on everything we're up to. The Brewlosophy podcast is made possible by the generous support of our sponsors, as well as all of our rad listeners. We seriously could not do this without you. Cheers to everyone who has subscribed and left a review of our show. It makes a huge difference. If you haven't yet, please consider doing so. Head over to brewlosophy.com/support to view a list of ways you can easily help us to continue producing this podcast. If you want a reward for your support, visit patreon.com/brewlosophy. Thanks again for listening. We'll be back next week with another episode of the Brewlosophy podcast. Until then, think beer.
Start off the morning with some hot tea, lemon and honey, cause it suits my bro. Put some herb in the bowl, yeah, it's homegrown. Ain't gotta go through the middleman, no.